guys, thanks so much for joining me today. I have young Sir Charles. You can see little pieces of him. He's taking a nap. Today I'm going to be talking about the 9 spooky, scary, horror-ish books I read in the month of November. 9 books, decent as far as quantity. Quality, I didn't have the best experience, and that's completely fine. Some months are like that. Some months you're just not going to like the majority of books. There was 1 book this month that I really enjoyed, 3 books that I got something out of, and then 5 books that kind of tied for last place. When I have a month like that where I found more things to dislike than to like, I tend to give that disclaimer early on that taste in literature is super subjective. I'm not saying these are bad authors, these are bad books. I personally just didn't enjoy them. I'm not saying you won't. I'm not saying you shouldn't read them. This is just my personal opinion of the books, okay? With that being said, we are going to start with our last place books, all 5 of them. These are said books. A lot of them have been on my TBR for a while. I'm glad I finally got to them. Unfortunately, I just didn't end up kind of understanding what all the hype was about. Let's just randomly select one of the 5 and we'll talk about it. Okay, first one. Stalking Jack the Ripper. Okay. This is the first book in, I believe, a 4-book series. Based on this, I don't think I'm going to continue on, but if anyone out there has read the whole series, let me know if any of the other ones are different than this, I guess. Okay. First, I am all for historical fiction where the people who are overlooked, specifically in this case, a woman in London, late 1800s, is able to take center stage. I'm all for like showing the girl power, showing how these women can be really strong despite the parameters set against them at the time. I think some authors do that really well and show that it's not just this physical strength, how these women can be really conniving and cunning in a man's world. This book felt like you took a girl from current time and you just dumped her in London at the time that Jack the Ripper was kind of beginning his murder spree on the prostitutes. The main character, Audrey Rose, she assists her uncle. He works specifically with the police, with the cadavers of those who have been killed, trying to determine how they died, see if they can get any clues that help solve the case. She's not supposed to be participating in this, especially because she is a woman of some stature. Her uncle allows her to assist him because supposedly she's very intelligent and very skilled. Supposedly, because she becomes involved in the investigation, and we're told she's intelligent a lot, but as far as going to like in the process of solving this mystery, she more stumbles across things rather than comes up with any of her own ideas. There's a love interest in here, and it's just like a copy of Sherlock Holmes, and all they do is quip back and forth, but it doesn't really go any deeper than that. The reveal of who Jack the Ripper isn't exactly surprising because it's a pretty small cast of characters. There's like 4 or 5 people who it can be, but there's just nothing leading up to it. You know how you get to that big mystery and you look back and you're like, ah, of course. There's none of that here because this person acted completely different before and after the discovery, and it just doesn't make sense and it's not satisfying. It felt more like the author kind of threw all these names in a bowl and then randomly selected one. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for me, guys. Next book on the list, we have the London Seance Society. Now, with a title like that, I was expecting quite a bit of supernatural intrigue. Unfortunately, I didn't really get it. This is more of a whodunit murder mystery than anything else. Also takes place in the late 1800s. This is set in Paris and focuses around a woman whose name is Lena. Her sister was recently murdered and the culprit was never convicted. She becomes apprenticed to one of the most well-known spiritualists of that time, whose name is Vaudeline. She works with the police, communicates with the spirits of murder victims in order to help bring the guilty party to justice. Lena is a skeptic. She doesn't really believe in this stuff, but for some reason, she still goes to Vaudeline in order to try and solve her sister's murder. The London Seance Society is a gentleman's club of spiritualists. There have been rumors circulating for years that there's some sort of fraud involved, that the spiritualists may not be as skilled as they say, that it might be a big con. When the president of the club is murdered, they bring in these two women, Lena and Vaudeline, to try and help solve his murder. There were a few things that I just didn't enjoy about this book. Overall, I'd have to say I just kind of found it boring. With historical fiction, I really like to be immersed in the time period. This didn't really do that for me. Same as the Jack the Ripper book. The romance did nothing for me. The characters did nothing for me. I didn't really enjoy the two POVs. It was more of like, okay, I have to finish this rather than me trying to like flip the page to see who did it. So next book here, I think I was most surprised that I didn't like. I went into this one with high hopes because I have been wanting to read this author for a while, and that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. This book. Let's just start with the premise. So this is set in the US in a southern state. I don't know if we're told which one. In the like 1980s, 1990s, where all the women are housewives and mothers. Their lives pretty much consist of taking their kids to clubs and soccer practice and cleaning the house and making dinner and not much else. Though we focus on a group of women who participate in a book club, our main protagonist is Patricia. Her husband is very dismissive of her. They just don't have the greatest relationship. Her children are horrors. Like, oh, her son especially. Her son, I was like, if there needs to be another victim, go for that one. He was the worst. One day a neighbor arrives and it turns out he's a vampire and he is killing the children of like a nearby town. The wives figure this out, go to their husbands. Whew, there's a scene in this book with a meeting where the women think they're going to be talking to the police and it's like all the husbands call a gathering. Made me so angry. I had to put the book down. I have not had to put a book down in so long because it had made me as mad as this one. I was furious. What I kind of assumed was going to happen is like the men don't believe them, so the women have to take matters into their own hands. They have to come together and defeat the big bad. Nope. That's what I was hoping the book would be. It didn't end up happening that way. So, okay. What didn't I like specifically about this one? The ending I thought was very anticlimactic. A lot of the book just felt like filler. There was some buildup, but it just felt like it went nowhere. During the time I was reading it, I took the kind of strong emotions that it provoked in me as a good sign that I needed to keep reading. Looking back, I just didn't enjoy the process of reading this one. I do want to read other Grady Hendrix books. I know there's one that's supposed to be like set in IKEA or something. If you have read any of his other books, please tell me, because the writing wasn't bad at all. It was just, I think it was where I thought the book was going versus where it went, and just, yeah. Next on the list is Horns by Joe Hill. The main character, Ig, goes out one night on a bender. In the morning, he wakes up and he has literal horns sticking out from his head. These horns give him some sort of supernatural ability where people want to reveal kind of their darkest secrets, desires, sins to him. You know the TV show Lucifer, how he always asks, I think like, what's your greatest desire? And they tell him, and it's something weird or wacky, and it helps solve a case or humorous in some way. This is not that. This is, you would never want to be in the vicinity of another person because the things that like your family and friends think about you, you'd never be able to look at them the same way, and deep down people are terrible. That's this book. Ig is the outcast of the small town he lives in because his previous girlfriend was raped and murdered. It's the general consensus that he is guilty. His parents are wealthy or renowned somehow, and they were able to get him off. The one good thing about these horns is that he is able to actually discover who killed his girlfriend. That's a really cool concept. Like, I think you can do really interesting things with that story. Reason this book didn't work out for me: I typically try and read books to escape how awful the world and people are. This book almost seemed like gleeful of that darkness in a way that just rubbed me the wrong way. I think Joe Hill writes with this kind of pessimism that's very similar to Stephen King. It reminded me a lot of some of his books that I haven't liked as much. I don't need to spend any more time in teenage boys' minds because there's no need. Early in the video, I did mention how literature tastes are very diverse. Different opinions are a good thing. And I say that because someone did comment on one of my videos and recommend this book. Luckily, it was already on the list to read, which thank you, by the way, for doing that. And that's not sarcasm. Even though I didn't like it, I really do enjoy getting book recommendations. It's just a warning because this is the last one of the 5 that were on the last. Next book, we're gonna go to ones I enjoyed. The Chalk Man. Okay, this reminded me of the book It by Stephen King. I did not like it. There were so many similarities between the two, and to be fair, it does cast, in terms of horror books, a pretty wide shadow, but there were so many similarities that instead of this being able to be like its own unique thing, I kept thinking, oh, this is just like in It, or this happened just like that, or haven't I read this before? Something like that. This book centers around a group of children, so we go back and forth in time between their childhood and them as adults. Something bad happened when they were children, and some of them come together as adults, not to defeat a big bad, but to kind of solve some murders. The main character of Eddie just was not very engaging for me. He was kind of like I've used this to describe other characters, but kind of like a bump on a log. He wasn't miserable, but he wasn't happy. He didn't really socialize. He didn't really have any hobbies. He wasn't crazy about his job. He existed in this state of just like existing, which just made me really sad for him. When he was a young boy at a local fair, there was some sort of accident where a beautiful girl ended up maimed. Years later, she ended up murdered. Eddie's group of friends used to communicate with each other by drawing little chalk men, and the different colors and the different symbols meant different things. These chalk figures end up near several of these bodies. As adults, this group of friends receives letters in the mail with a chalk figure on them. So it kind of becomes is this a warning to us? Is this a threat? And then one of the friends dies, so it becomes even more complicated. For me, this just felt like the mystery was kind of peppered in here and there rather than like one realization leading to this, just kind of really random, scattered. The twist ending felt more like a deception on the author's part rather than like, aha. Knowing it made everything that happened before it just lose a lot of its weight. And some people really like those sort of endings. I don't generally. So for me, unfortunately, this was a miss. I've had enough of the negativity. I don't want to complain about books anymore. I want to go on to more positive things. These next 3 books weren't perfect, but I definitely did enjoy them. First, Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book. I think I've come to the conclusion after reading, I think this is the 4th Neil Gaiman book I've read, that I enjoy his books that are geared more towards adults more than his kids' books. This is one of the kids' books, so it didn't like blow me away or anything, but I did still enjoy it. This book jumps right into the action. In the first chapter, a family is murdered and the only survivor is a toddler. Somehow he finds his way out of the home into a local graveyard. The dead inhabitants decide to keep him there and raise him because there's some sort of evil out in the world that is seeking to find him, but he can be safe in the graveyard because that's the only place they can protect him. Nobody, who they call Bod, is raised in this graveyard. Lots of wacky characters from all these different time periods that are buried there who end up educating him and telling him stories. I really like Neil Gaiman's writing. I like these bizarre concepts he comes up with. There's a sort of like sweet hopefulness to his books that I really enjoy. The plot wavers in and out a bit. The pace was a little off, but overall it was a very sweet book. It was very enjoyable. Again, his adult stuff I love more, but this was good. Specifically Neverwhere, the sequel. When's it coming out? I've been waiting. I'm ready for it. This next book pick might shock you guys. And what's going to be shocking is the fact that it's not on the very top of my list, because I have ranted and raved about this author aplenty. And that is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is the first Christina Henry book I think I haven't given 5 stars. I love all of her other books. I liked this one. This book takes place in the middle of the woods in a cabin, very isolated, with a girl named Maddie and her husband, William. Maddie doesn't really remember much of her life. William is quite a lot older than her, and she doesn't remember really before they were married. It's really difficult to gauge the kind of time period that this takes place in initially, because everything they do is very antiquated. Like, she wears dresses, it's homemade everything. He goes out and does the hunting and stuff like that. The inciting incident occurs when some sort of creature, you okay, Charles? Some sort of creature in the woods starts killing other animals in a kind of eerie fashion, where they're not killing to eat. They're killing and then taking these bones and kind of collecting the bones in caves. 3 strangers in the woods happen across the couple. William is very abusive, very paranoid. Things break from there. One of the things I really love about Christina Henry's books is that the world she creates are so vivid around these characters. This story takes place in a cabin in the woods, so while it is atmospheric, there's nothing particularly unique about the world. It is this world, to be fair. Like, this book does have supernatural things in it, but it doesn't go so extreme as her other books. She also tends to create her monsters to reflect certain things about the protagonist in her book. And this one, there are metaphors, but it didn't hit me quite so hard. The book was a little repetitive. The main character, Maddie, started remembering parts of her past, very conveniently timed. The book focused primarily way less on the monster and more on the man, which I was more excited about the monster part, but that's how it goes sometimes. So while this one wasn't a home run, I'm still glad I read it, and it does not make me any less excited to read some of her other books that I've not gotten to yet. Next on the list, we have The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. Our main character, Elizabeth, is a young, starving girl when the Frankensteins rescue her from her abusive mother. They decide to sort of adopt her, but not really, make her a part of the household, because their son, Victor, has some issues. He is prone to fits of violence and rage. He has difficulty kind of interpreting and conveying emotion, and they're hoping having a companion for him might soften some of his sharp edges. Elizabeth is pretty successful in doing so. She and Victor become very close, but years later he leaves for college and she's stuck at the family home. Money is tight, some debts are being called in, and without Victor there to vouch for her, she's afraid of being thrown out. She goes to find him and bring him home. She discovers that he is engaged in some very unsavory things. She finds a lot of mutilated corpses. He's been doing a lot of tests and experiments on these dead people. The reason that he's doing them relates to Elizabeth, and it might not be a good thing. I really like the relationship between Victor and Elizabeth. It's definitely not healthy, but it was interesting just because there are dark parts of both that they kind of recognize in each other. While Victor's goes a lot deeper for other reasons, Elizabeth has known what it's like to to be hungry and to be without a home, and she is determined to do what she needs to in order to survive. Number one book of the month that I enjoyed the most, In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. This, for me, was just a really good, solid mystery. I liked it a lot. The main character of Nora is a writer. She's also a bit of a loner. Randomly, one day, she receives an invitation to a hen party, which I learned is what people in the UK call a bachelorette party, by a friend she used to be close to when she was younger, but she hasn't talked to this friend in over 10 years. Eventually, after a lot of debate, she decides she will attend. The hen party is taking place in this kind of glass cabin in the woods. I don't know why everything is taking place in the woods this month, but it is. And there's 5 women there, 1 man, all very different personalities, and things get combustive pretty fast. As we go through the book, we actually go back and forth in time. So we see snippets of the hen party, like getting the invitation, going there, meeting the people, participating in the games. But then currently Nora is in the hospital. Something went wrong. She can't remember everything that happened, but she hears the police saying something about a homicide. So it's a back and forth of filling in the blank pieces, solving the mystery, find out who was killed, why they were killed, who killed them. The author did, I think, a really good job of laying blame at several potential characters. The writing was really good, was really smooth. I kept wanting to know what happened next. It kept me turning the page. Good book. I liked it. And that's it, guys. Those are the 9 books I read in October. Overall, you know, more of a struggle this month, but again, look at Charles stretching out. That is a-okay. Nothing wrong with that. Charles also has a potential adopter looking at him Tuesday, so he might not be here. He's sleeping. Okay, guys, thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.